Right, okay, so it's a new theme for this week if you wanted to have a go at this, which is looking at fabrics and textiles. So this was I had a request from one of my other groups, so I thought it might be quite an interesting thing to take on if you fancy. So it might be something that's more of a kind of study or a sketch rather than a finished painting. Although if you wanted to, you could make it into a painting. Got a few examples that I brought in. So Naomi's brought this book in. So this is Tamara Lempicka. So it's sort of not kind of stylized 1930s style images. So that's that one. And I've brought a couple of my Leonardo books in. So there's a couple of quite nice examples of where he's really just made a study in fabrics. There's a few different ones, drapes, and presumably this would be working up to a portrait or some sort of figure study. So I always think it's quite interesting how artists, particularly like looking at the Leonardos, how they build ideas up. So in terms of setting up, I've got a few fabrics in this box here. If you haven't got anything and you want to have a go. The other thing is, if you wanted to make it into a very simple still life, you could put a single object or a couple of very simple. And sometimes that can give a little bit of focus. So if you want to do that. I won't bother with a demo, but that's something you could do. In terms of mediums, I thought I'll do a couple of very quick demos. Find a piece of paper. Let's use this bit. Just do a bit on there. So it could be charcoal works quite well, or something like pastels, something where you can go between soft edges and hard edges. Here we go. So if I was going to do something with charcoal, I usually start with some line work. So with this setup here, we've got some quite interesting folds. And what I'm really looking for is where one bit of material meets another, or one fold meets another. I'm drawing a line, and then you'll get to a certain point where the line quite often just sort of peters out. So as I'm coming down here, I can't see much more, but then there's another edge that starts here and comes across. There's another one here where it's quite a lot lighter. So you'll end up with a line drawing, and then from there, what I try to do is lose the lines. So in this case, it could be another line here, there's another edge. Inside here, there's a little bit of shadow there. So I can kind of work basically working up to that edge. And quite often you'll have like quite a sharp edge, and then you might have quite a softer, more blurry edge. Something a little bit more like that. So charcoal's ideal for this type of drawing. In that you can kind of work on each little area and build it and develop it. And again, the same sort of thing here. There's quite a lot of shadow along this part, and just a little bit here. And then as I get towards here, it does start to sort of soften out, probably in both directions. I could probably blur that side as well a little bit, just make it a little bit darker, and then just go over that. So yeah, it's a nice medium, I think, for working quickly with tones, blocking tones in quite quickly. So that'd be the drawn approach. Do exactly the same with pastels. Perhaps with pastels you draw in the darks and the lights. Perhaps a dark pastel and a light pastel, 2 or 3. If you wanted to work with paints, the demos I've started, so this was one from Tuesday. I'll do something a little bit similar today. What I've done here is using water mixable oils. It could be, if you've got ordinary oils, that'd be fine. Now this will stay wet for a while, or I can, although it's sort of kind of touch dry because it's soaked into the board, I can rehydrate it, I can lift bits out. So I would approach pretty much the same sort of way. I'm just using the colours a little bit more tonally. I'm not too worried about the particular colour. So again, just getting that nice dark area in here. And with the paint, I can either just soften the brush marks out like that, or I can get another dry brush and just soften them out that way. So I'll bring that around there a little bit more. And then the other fold coming out this way. It's going a little bit lighter here. I find that squinting is always quite useful, just to be able to see the relative tones and just simplifies the image. The other thing I'm also trying to avoid is patterns and things that are too complicated. So this might be quite a nice challenge, but it would be quite a challenge. But something like a pattern, either I could tackle that next week, or if you've had enough after today or gone to something else. The morning group have had enough after once next week. But if you fancy patterns, that could be quite interesting, sort of painting a pattern. But the first thing would be to get the light and dark working, because often it can look a little bit more decorative if you just go straight for the pattern. So patterns and textures, you kind of still need to get all the lights and darks sorted first. So this area would be a little bit lighter here. Paint like that. And yeah, sometimes the other way I soften the paint is just using a dry brush and just kind of going back over that edge and just softening it out that way. So that's another way you can manipulate paint. And then for the highlights, it's either adding white to the mix. So I'll do a little bit of both here. So it could be that you've got, you know, like a nice bright highlight like that, which I've got quite a highlight there. Or the other approach is to just wash some of the paint away. So when I do that, I try and find a brush that's fairly worn, and some of mine are a lot more stubbly than that. But you can then be a bit more precise in where you wash areas out, and then just get a little bit of cleanish tissue, just dry that back. So that can look quite nice. I quite like this almost like transparent look, which you can achieve with just darker colours and just using the colour coming through. So yeah, a couple of different approaches that you could use if you fancy trying that. All good? Any questions? Yeah. So if you do fancy having a go, we've got various materials in here. The other thing is, we're here next week, and the week after we're having a break. So just to remind you, we've got here next week, but a week off the following week.